Myanmar's military rulers have branded a rival national unity government as a terrorist group. The military also blamed it for bombings, arson and killings. Myanmar's army has struggled to impose order since seizing power on the 1st of February.
Bombings are reported daily and local militias have been formed to confront the army, while anti-junta protests have not stopped across the country. Strikes by opponents of the coup have paralyzed the economy. The National Unity Government, which operates undercover, also describes the army as a terrorist force. They announced last week that it would set up a People's Defense Force. The junta had previously accused its opponents of treason. Protesters marched against the junta in dozens of places on Saturday. At least 774 civilians have been killed by security forces and 3,778 are detained. That is according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners activist group. However, the junta disputes those figures and says at least 24 members of the security forces have been killed in protests. Meanwhile, more than 11,000 academics and other university staff opposed to Myanmar's ruling junta have been suspended after going on strike in protest against military rule.
To help us unpack the story a little bit more, we're now joined by Mabrur Ahmed, who's a campaigner, activist, and has been following the story quite closely. Mabrur, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. It's been just over 3 months now since the military took over the country through a coup, and it just seems that week by week more and more force is required for them to keep in control.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been quite unabated, really, the suppression that the military has shown on its people, really. I think Myanmar right now, with the recent news about the 11,100 academics being essentially suspended from teaching, is just another latest blow in a long, long line of civil society being forced to shut down and not being able to operate in a way which is normal for any nation state at all. And I think it's just another one of the many weapons that the military has used and is going to continue to use against its own people in a way to almost force or succumb a civil society to accept the military as the legitimate ruling party, if you like. And unfortunately, I think the very fact that the academics have been targeted shows really the level that the military is willing to go to in order to have that suppression and that control.
Why have the academics been targeted?
Well, in essence, they are part of an apparatus of civil society disobedience, and they have just been simply targeted as being another one of the apparatus of civil society disobedience. And I think really it's quite cynical, and it's done with effect. The suspension is done with the effect to soften, if you like, the feeling, the emotion that the civil disobedience movement has against the military, and it's another way of trying to exert control and to show the might and the power that the military still has and retains over Myanmar at large.
And then you start to hear stories of poets like Ket T, who died in police detention. The family says that his body was returned to them, but missing organs. When you start to read stories like this, these people then, I'm sure, then become symbols of resistance.
Yeah, of course. I mean, almost immediately, people like the poet that you mentioned, and many other people, actually, many hundreds, and possibly even now reaching into thousands, have lost their lives in these last 3 months, and they almost immediately become martyrs, and they become heroes and figures of national resistance. But and that's on one side. That's from the civil society side. But from the military side, the message that they're trying to send is that we will do whatever we will. We can do whatever we want to do. And in essence, it's to say that there is no punitive action against the military and against the crimes that they are committing. I think even just returning the body itself is a large show of disrespect, and furthermore, with the fact that the body is dismembered and has had parts of the organs taken out, and even just the way from the very first protest of the young lady that lost her life as the first person who died from the protest until now, there are hundreds of stories of absolute distraught families and absolutely destroyed communities, and it's almost a battle of will. It's a battle of patience about who can outlast, and of course, with all the military power and with all the might of an infrastructure of an entire nation, against just the will of the people. It's unfortunate that the will of the people, and it's the people themselves who are going to suffer and who have suffered the most.
780 people killed. Myanmar's friend China surely must be feeling pressure to stop this, because they can't allow more lives to continue to be lost in this way.
Well, firstly, that figure 780, that's the official reported number of deaths. There are many, many thousands that are unreported of people who are missing and who have not been returned to their families. And so we must take that into consideration as well. Regardless, even if the number was 10,000 out of a population of 53 million, from a repressive state like Myanmar and its very friendly elder brother in China, these numbers simply don't mean anything. The same thing, China itself is instituting a genocide against the Uyghur people, and it has faced many kind of accusations of genocide and tribulations through the international community. And it itself has not yielded to those calls to show restraint or to arrest their ambition against the Uyghur people. So I very much doubt that this is going to have an impact in terms of its policy towards Myanmar. It has shown China time and time again with its trusted ally Russia that it will counter any UN Security Council statement, resolution, action, any sort of punitive reaction, and it will continue to do so, unfortunately, because simply the trading power that it receives, the economic benefit that it receives from being a partner of Myanmar and the premier partner in Myanmar simply outweighs any human costs, sadly.
Tell us a little bit about this government of unity that's been formed by the resistance, I guess. Who do they represent, and what is this presenting another layer of headache for the Myanmar military?
Supposedly, the National Unity Government, the NUG, is supposed to be the face of the resistance against the military. And to a large part it is. It's made up, or it's an iteration of the CPRH. It's supposed to be an iteration or the kind of instrument of the CDM, the General Public Disobedience Movement. But in effect and in actuality, it has a lack of representation from any Muslim members. It has a lack of representation from the Rohingya. It still has amongst its rank genocide deniers. And so therefore, there is a large chunk of cynicism and a large chunk of doubt that overshadows the National Unity Government. For many observers, myself included, it seems that this is just another way for the NLD, or the initial NLD party under the guidance of Suu Kyi, to find another way, another route into power, riding along the popular wave of dissent against the military. Now, I'm not saying that the NUG is a failed or a doomed entity. I think it's probably the only thing that's likely to institute some sort of regime change within Burma, within Myanmar, but it definitely needs much more closer investigation, much closer or much more progressive policies and representation as well. It's a good start, but it's definitely not enough so far as it looks today.
And where does Aung San Suu Kyi find herself placed now in the middle of all of this politics? Before this coup, there were people who were not always happy with her approach in dealing with the military. They've literally turned their back on her, and she's back to where, and perhaps even worse than before she first became president and when she was winning the Nobel Peace Prize. But it's quite clear that the military want her out of the way, and they're using whatever legislation is possible, including one that could see her jailed for 14 years. Will we see Aung San Suu Kyi again, even if the resistance is victorious?
Well, firstly, I think there's a split of opinion about Suu Kyi. I think within the country, she still retains quite a popular support. And we know this simply because of the November elections. You know, she swept to power in the November elections, and that's what actually triggered the military to feel so cornered into instituting this coup in the first instance. I think internationally, however, her endearment or the endearment towards her has reduced quite significantly. In terms of the military themselves, I think they actually know that if they are to retain any sort of power, that they probably will have to readdress their stance on Suu Kyi. And I think really the future of the country lies at Suu Kyi's doorsteps or on her shoulders, about whether or not she is willing to once again get into bed, if you like, or get into allyship with the military and form some sort of I suppose, a pact, a deal, some sort of decision that she reaches, that she can work with the military still holding some sort of power, and she returns as if you like the state councillor, or whether or not she says, actually, you know what, the calls for disobedience, the calls for a new unity government means that we can no longer operate within the realms of the military. And if she takes that stance, I think that the military will absolutely put her under lock and key for maybe not even 14 years, maybe even further than that, and essentially ensure that she doesn't have any route back to power. And if you're asking me as an analyst, what's better for the country? What's better for the country is, at this moment, there is a real hope. There's an opportunity for actual change. And the actual change probably doesn't include the military or Suu Kyi. The actual change needs to now embrace the overarching feeling amongst the youth, which is one of reconciliation, one of compromise, one of acknowledgement of past crimes against the Rohingya and other ethnicities, and an actual desire for an actual unified territory of Myanmar. Now, that doesn't necessarily represent and translate insofar as the NUG, the National Unity Government, is made up so far, because the NUG, the National Unity Government, still has at its head and at its core the Suu Kyi and the NLD party. And until that has some level of change, then I don't think that the National Unity Government will actually be what it says it is, a unity government. It will just be an NLD version 2.0.
Mabrur Ahmed, founder and director of Restless Beings, UK-based human rights group and political commentator. Thanks very much for joining us. Your insights greatly appreciated.